The evidence lay spread across the dining table like a blueprint. Hotel receipts, bank statements, screenshots of intimate conversations, each piece meticulously arranged by the same hands that had built their home. Miguel stepped back, surveying his work with the same critical eye he brought to his construction sites, where attention to detail meant the difference between collapse and stability. 2 years of Laura's deception now documented with undeniable precision, while she remained blissfully unaware at her professional convention with Ricardo. His calloused hands, earned through overtime shifts that had funded her affairs, traced the edge of divorce papers waiting for her signature. Some say revenge is best served cold. But Miguel knew something better. Revenge isn't served at all. Consequences simply arrive, built by the architects of their own betrayal. And Laura's would be waiting when her plane landed tomorrow. If you've ever felt your trust and sacrifice being taken for granted, Miguel's story will show you there's a better option than silent suffering or bitter revenge. The morning sun glinted off fresh concrete as Miguel Rodriguez knelt to check the consistency of the pour. The foundation had to be perfect. Any weakness now would compromise the entire structure later. 20 years in construction had taught him that much. "Looking good, boss," said Javier, the foreman's apprentice. "You've got the magic touch with these pours." Miguel smiled modestly. At 35, he'd earned respect on job sites across the city. His reputation for reliability and precision had made him the go-to supervisor for critical foundation work. "No magic," Miguel replied, standing and brushing concrete dust from his jeans. "Just patience and attention. Rushing a foundation is asking for trouble down the road." His phone buzzed in his pocket. Laura. His smile widened as he pulled off his work gloves. "Hey, I need to take this." Miguel stepped away from the noise of the site, pressing the phone to his ear. "Hey, what's up?" "Miguel." Laura's voice carried the particular tone he'd come to recognize, the one she used when she wanted something. "The regional sales convention got moved up. It's next weekend in Cancun." Miguel frowned slightly. "That's pretty sudden. Wasn't it scheduled for next month?" "These things happen in corporate," she replied, with a hint of impatience. "Ricardo says it's crucial I attend. He's presenting our new marketing strategy, and he wants me there to help field questions." Ricardo. Miguel's jaw tightened involuntarily. Laura's boss had a reputation among office wives that Miguel had heard about at company functions. The way Ricardo's eyes lingered too long on female employees, the convenient working dinners that ran late. 3 days in Cancun with Ricardo, Miguel said carefully. "Just the two of you?" Laura's sigh crackled through the speaker. "Don't start with this again. The whole department is going. This is important for my career." "I understand that," Miguel said, trying to keep his tone neutral. You just what? Don't trust me? Or is it that you don't think I deserve a chance at advancement?" The edge in her voice sharpened. "Not everyone wants to stay in the same position for 20 years, Miguel." The subtle dig stung more than he wanted to admit. Miguel had passed up a management position 3 years ago, one that would have meant extensive travel, specifically because Laura had said she didn't want a husband who was always gone. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "Look, I have a meeting. We'll talk about this tonight." She hung up before he could respond. Miguel stared at the phone for a moment, then slipped it back into his pocket. The concrete awaited, and unlike the conversation with his wife, this was something he could get right. The apartment smelled of garlic and olive oil when Miguel opened the door that evening. He'd stopped for flowers, yellow daisies, Laura's favorite, hoping to ease the tension from their earlier conversation. "Something smells amazing," he called, setting his keys in the ceramic bowl Laura had bought on their honeymoon in Mexico. 4 years ago, when things had been simpler, Laura emerged from the kitchen, wineglass in hand. She wore the blue dress he'd complimented last week, her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. She was beautiful. That had never been in question. "I made that pasta you like," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thought we could use a nice dinner." Miguel held out the flowers. "Peace offering?" She took them with a small smile. "You didn't need to do that." "Wanted to," he said, following her to the kitchen. "About earlier, let's not start dinner with an argument," Laura interrupted, arranging the flowers in a vase. "I'm going to the convention. It's important for my career, and if you support me like you say you do, you'll understand that." Miguel leaned against the counter, watching her stir the pasta. "I do support your career. I've always supported it. But is it wrong to be concerned about Ricardo's intentions? Other wives have noticed how he acts around female employees." Laura rolled her eyes. "Those are just jealous rumors. Ricardo is a professional who specifically requested you accompany him to a beach resort?" "The entire marketing department is going," Laura said sharply. "Don't make this into something it's not." Miguel took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to control you. I just don't trust him." "Well, I need you to trust me." Laura set down her wineglass with more force than necessary. "This is exactly why I don't tell you about work events anymore. You always make me feel guilty for advancing my career." "That's not true, isn't it?" Laura's phone chimed with a notification. She glanced at it, quickly typed a response, then placed it face down on the counter. "My female colleagues don't deal with this kind of interrogation from their husbands." "It's not an interrogation to ask questions about a last-minute trip with a man who has a reputation," Miguel said, his frustration growing. "This is why women hit glass ceilings," Laura said dismissively. "Their partners can't handle them working closely with male supervisors without making it weird." Miguel felt himself being maneuvered into an impossible position: express legitimate concerns and be labeled controlling, or remain silent and ignore his instincts. He recognized the technique. Laura had become increasingly skilled at it over the past year. "Fine," he conceded, choosing peace over principle. "When do you leave?" Laura's expression softened, victory achieved. "Friday morning. I'll be back Sunday night." Over dinner, Laura talked enthusiastically about the convention, the networking opportunities, the potential for promotion. Miguel listened, nodding in all the right places, trying to ignore the persistent buzz of her phone and the way she kept checking it under the table. Later, as Laura slept beside him, Miguel stared at the ceiling. When had conversations with his wife started feeling like negotiations he was destined to lose? When had expressing concern become controlling behavior? He turned to look at her peaceful face in the dim light filtering through the blinds. Next to the bed, her phone screen illuminated with another late-night notification. The preview showed only Ricardo and the beginning of a message cut off by privacy settings. Miguel rolled away, closing his eyes against the blue glow of secrets he wasn't ready to face. The apartment felt unusually quiet with Laura gone. Miguel had driven her to the airport that morning, kissed her goodbye, and pretended not to notice Ricardo waiting nearby, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not his smirk. 3 days, she'd said, squeezing his hand. Don't work too hard while I'm gone. Now, with a rare Saturday off, Miguel decided to use the time to organize their home office. Laura had been handling their finances recently, a task he'd happily surrendered when she'd pointed out his old-fashioned paper filing system was inefficient compared to her digital approach. He frowned at the stack of unopened mail on the desk, bills he'd thought were being paid online. He began sorting through them, creating neat piles: utilities, credit cards, medical expenses. A statement from a credit card he didn't recognize caught his attention. The envelope was addressed to Laura, but as joint account holders, they'd always been transparent about finances. Inside was a bill for $370.42. Miguel scanned the statement, his confusion deepening at charges from a hotel, not in Cancun, but downtown, just 20 minutes from their apartment. The date corresponded with a team dinner Laura had attended 3 weeks ago, a dinner that supposedly ended at 10 p.m., though she hadn't returned until after midnight. His stomach tightened as he continued reading. Room service charges for 2, including champagne. An overnight stay despite the hotel's proximity to their home. Miguel set the statement aside, telling himself there must be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps a company expense accidentally charged to her personal card. He opened their shared laptop to check their other accounts. The browser history had been cleared, unusual since neither of them was particularly tech-focused. He navigated to their bank website and logged in with the password they shared. The transaction history showed regular transfers from their joint savings to Laura's personal checking account. Small amounts, $200 here, $300 there, adding up to thousands over the past year. Money he'd worked overtime to save, money they'd discussed using for a down payment on a house someday. With growing unease, Miguel opened their cloud storage account to search for recent bank statements. He navigated through folders of vacation photos and work documents until an unlabeled folder caught his attention. It required a password he didn't have. After 2 failed attempts with Laura's usual passwords, a pattern clicked in his mind. He typed Ricardo's name, and the folder opened. The air left his lungs as images filled the screen. Laura with Ricardo in hotel rooms. Laura with another man he didn't recognize. Screenshots of text conversations full of intimate details and mockery of Miguel's naivete. In one particularly painful exchange, Ricardo had asked, "Doesn't your husband wonder where you are?" Laura's response, "Miguel's too trusting. I tell him I'm working late, and he just makes sure dinner's warm when I get home." Followed by laughing emojis. His dedication, his trust, reduced to a joke between lovers. Miguel's hands trembled as he scrolled through 2 years of deception meticulously documented by Laura herself. Every suspicious late night, every work trip, every unexplained expense, all laid bare in digital evidence she hadn't bothered to hide properly. He minimized the folder when his phone rang. Carlos, his friend since high school, now working in hospitality management at one of the downtown hotels. "Hey, man," Miguel answered, his voice strained. "You okay? You sound off." Miguel stared at the minimized folder on the screen. "Not really. Can you come over? I need to talk to someone." "Be there in 20, Carlos replied without hesitation. While waiting, Miguel returned to the digital evidence. A new discovery hit him like a physical blow. An Instagram post Laura had shared just hours after leaving for Cancun. A poolside selfie with the caption, "Finally free from controlling expectations for the weekend. Some men can't handle a modern, independent woman. #living my best life. #no regrets." The comments section overflowed with supportive responses from people who knew only Laura's manufactured version of their marriage. Friends and acquaintances offering sympathy for her difficult situation with her old-fashioned husband. The public humiliation burned worse than the private betrayal. Not only was she cheating, she was crafting a narrative that made her the victim. The doorbell's chime pulled Miguel from his spiral. He opened the door to find Carlos holding a six-pack of beer, concern etched on his face. "That bad, huh?" Carlos asked, noting Miguel's expression. Miguel let him in without responding, leading him to the kitchen table where he'd placed the printed credit card statement and laptop. "I need you to tell me if I'm crazy," Miguel said, opening two beers and sliding one toward his friend, "or if what I'm seeing is real." Carlos set down his beer untouched after reviewing the evidence. His discomfort was palpable. "You knew," Miguel said. It wasn't a question. Carlos rubbed his face. "I suspected. One of our bartenders mentioned Laura was a regular with different executives. I didn't want to believe it was true." "Why didn't you tell me?" "And say what? That your wife might be cheating based on bar gossip?" Carlos shook his head. "I was hoping I was wrong." "How long?" Carlos met his gaze reluctantly. The bartender noticed them about 8 months ago. But from these pictures, he gestured to the screen. It started well before that. Miguel nodded slowly, processing. "And Ricardo wasn't the only one." "No," Carlos confirmed quietly. "There was another guy from her office, maybe more." The confirmation hollowed out Miguel's chest. The foundation of his marriage, what he thought they were building together, had been structurally compromised from the beginning. No wonder it had felt increasingly unstable. "What are you going to do?" Carlos asked. Miguel stared at their wedding photo on the wall, then deliberately turned it face down. "I'm calling David," he said, reaching for his phone. His brother-in-law was one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. "I need to know my options before she gets back." The moment of betrayal had transformed into something else, a blueprint for dismantling what couldn't be repaired. "Everything on that table is inadmissible in court," David said, reviewing the evidence Miguel had compiled. They sat in David's home office, legal pads and coffee cups accumulating as morning stretched into afternoon. "What?" Miguel looked up sharply. "But it's proof. Proof obtained by accessing password-protected accounts without explicit permission." David removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But that doesn't mean it's useless. It tells us what to look for through proper legal channels." Miguel leaned back in his chair, exhausted. He'd barely slept since discovering Laura's betrayal the day before. "So what can I do?" "Before we discuss options," David said carefully, "I need to know what you want from this, Miguel. Revenge, maximum financial damage, or just a clean break?" Miguel considered the question. Despite the pain searing through him, scorched earth vengeance wasn't his nature. "I want what's fair," he said finally. "What I earned. And I want out with my dignity intact." David nodded approvingly. "Then we document everything before she knows you're aware. That's your advantage right now." He outlined a strategy: gather legally admissible evidence, separate finances, prepare divorce papers, and create distance, all before confrontation. "Laura's credit card statement is fair game since you're an authorized user on the account," David explained. "And the joint bank account transfers are documented through statements you legally have access to." They moved to David's computer, pulling up Miguel and Laura's financial history. The screen filled with a damning timeline. Hotel charges coinciding with late meetings, cash withdrawals that aligned with weekend work retreats, luxury purchases for people who weren't Miguel. "Over $15,000, David said, calculating the diverted funds. Money from your joint savings, primarily funded by your income. Miguel stared at the figure, anger replacing shock. He'd worked 60-hour weeks to build that savings. Overtime and weekend shifts, while Laura complained about his absence, apparently filling her time with affairs he was unknowingly financing. "We need to protect what's left," David advised. "Do you have any separate accounts she doesn't know about?" Miguel thought of the conversation 3 years ago with his financial advisor, who had recommended maintaining a small individual savings account, standard advice for both partners in a marriage. Laura had dismissed it as planning for failure, but Miguel had quietly opened one anyway, depositing a small percentage of each paycheck. "Yes," Miguel confirmed, "about $8,000 in a separate savings account." "Good. First thing Monday, we secure those funds and document the state of all joint accounts. Then we prepare divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences." "Not adultery?" Miguel asked. "Adultery requires more specific legal proof." "Unless you want a private investigator and a much messier public process, irreconcilable differences gives you a cleaner, faster exit." Miguel nodded, grateful for David's expertise. "What about our apartment? The lease has both our names." "Who pays the rent?" "I do, from my direct deposit." "Then we've got options." David made another note. "What's your timeline here? When does Laura return?" "Tomorrow evening." David's eyebrows rose. "That accelerates things. Are you prepared to confront her then?" Miguel considered the question. The thought of facing Laura, hearing her excuses and manipulations, made his stomach turn. But the alternative, pretending he didn't know while living alongside her betrayal, seemed impossible. "Actually," Miguel said slowly, "an alternative strategy forming. I was thinking of a different approach." He outlined his plan. Use the remaining 24 hours to completely separate their lives. Move his essential belongings to a new apartment. Document and reclaim items he'd purchased with his separate funds. Prepare comprehensive evidence for Laura to find upon her return. Let the consequences speak for themselves, Miguel concluded. No dramatic confrontation, no opportunity for her to twist things. David studied him with newfound respect. That's surprisingly strategic. Most clients want the satisfaction of confrontation. "I'm a builder," Miguel said simply. "I know that properly laid foundations matter more than dramatic gestures." As they continued planning, Miguel's phone lit up with a text from Laura. "Miss you. Having a great time. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night," accompanied by a heart emoji. The casual deception hardened his resolve. By tomorrow night, the life Laura returned to would be unrecognizable, not through vengeful destruction, but through the simple removal of the foundation she'd taken for granted. "Let's get started," Miguel said, turning off his phone. "We have a lot to do before tomorrow." Monday morning found Miguel in the office of Martin Reyes, the financial advisor who had suggested the separate savings account 3 years earlier. Martin reviewed the documentation David had helped prepare, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "I always recommend financial independence within marriage," Martin said, "but this is precisely why. You followed my advice about keeping a percentage separate, which puts you in a much better position now." Miguel nodded, remembering how close he'd come to closing the account last year when Laura had wanted a new car. Another bullet dodged. "We need to secure these funds immediately," Martin continued. "I also suggest freezing your credit to prevent any new joint accounts or charges." Given the pattern of behavior, it's not uncommon for the offending spouse to attempt financial retaliation when discovered. As Martin processed the paperwork to transfer Miguel's savings to a new, secure account, he made a phone call to a colleague in real estate. "Elena, I have a client in need of immediate short-term housing, furnished if possible. He covered the receiver. Any preferences on location? Walking distance to the construction site on Alvarez Street if possible, Miguel replied. I'm there for the next 6 months at least. Within an hour, Miguel had an appointment to view an apartment 3 blocks from his current project. By noon, he was signing a 6-month lease on a small but well-maintained 1-bedroom unit in a secure building. The property manager handed him the keys. Usually we require 2 weeks' notice, but Elena vouched for you. You can move in immediately. Miguel felt a weight lift as he stood in the empty apartment. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating possibilities rather than betrayals. The blank walls and unfurnished rooms represented something he hadn't felt in months. Freedom to build something honest. His phone rang, Carlos checking in. I signed a lease, Miguel told him. I need help moving some things this afternoon. I'm off at 4. Just tell me where. Miguel's next stop was a storage facility where he rented a small unit. Following David's advice, he would document and store items that belonged solely to him until the divorce proceedings clarified property division. By the time Carlos arrived at the apartment with his truck, Miguel had methodically inventoried his possessions, separating them into categories, clearly his, clearly Laura's, and joint property. He'd taken photos of everything for documentation, creating the detailed record David had advised. You're handling this better than I would, Carlos observed, as they loaded his tools and personal belongings. I'm not sure better is the right word, Miguel replied, carefully wrapping his grandfather's woodworking tools in protective cloth. I'm just trying to be strategic instead of emotional. Still, Carlos insisted, most guys would be throwing her stuff out windows by now. Miguel secured a box of family photographs. That would just make me the villain in her story. I'm not giving her that satisfaction. They worked efficiently through the afternoon, moving Miguel's belongings either to storage or to the new apartment. The process was strangely cathartic. Each item reclaimed, each box packed, represented another piece of himself preserved from the wreckage. As evening approached, Miguel focused on the most important task: documentation. At the dining table, he arranged evidence in clear chronological order. Bank statements showing transfers to Laura's personal account, credit card bills for hotel rooms, screenshots of her social media posts mocking him, and text messages with timestamps that contradicted her claimed whereabouts. Beside this damning collection, he placed the divorce papers David had prepared, post-dated for the following day. A separate envelope contained screenshots of the more intimate communications and photos, evidence of the affairs themselves rather than just the financial deception. The final touch was a letter, written in Miguel's steady hand. Laura. By now you've realized things have changed. I've removed myself and my belongings from this apartment. I've also documented the systematic deception you've maintained throughout our marriage. I've reclaimed items purchased with my separate funds. Everything else remains untouched for proper division during divorce proceedings. All communication should go through my attorney, David Ortiz. His contact information is with the divorce papers. Miguel. No accusations, no emotional pleas, just facts and consequences. Carlos returned from moving the last load to the storage unit. You're really not going to be here when she gets back? No point, Miguel said, surveying the transformed apartment. Everything that needs to be said is on that table. He took one final look around the space that had been their home. Despite Laura's betrayal, there had been good moments here too. But like a compromised structure, no amount of cosmetic repair could fix what was fundamentally unsound. Let's go, Miguel said, picking up his last bag. I have an early start tomorrow." As they left, he placed his key on the entryway table next to the evidence. The door locked behind him with a definitive click, the sound of one chapter ending and another beginning. Laura's flight was scheduled to land at 6:42 p.m. Miguel knew this because she'd texted her itinerary before departing, asking him to pick her up. He hadn't responded. Instead, at 6:45, Miguel sat in his new apartment, watching the security camera feed he'd installed before leaving. The simple camera, legal and visible, would allow him to witness Laura's reaction without being present for the drama. At 7:38, a rideshare pulled up outside their building. Laura emerged, wheeling her suitcase, checking her phone with a frown, probably wondering why Miguel hadn't answered her calls. Miguel watched as she entered the building, disappearing from view. He switched to the indoor camera feed, showing only the entryway and dining area, respecting privacy while capturing what he needed to document. At 7:42, the apartment door opened. Laura called out, "Miguel!" her voice tinny through the camera's speakers. Silence answered her. She moved through the entryway, noticing his missing shoes and jacket. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation as she continued into the apartment, disappearing from view. Miguel could track her discovery process through sound. The opening of closet doors, her increasingly urgent calls of his name, her footsteps quickening as she moved from room to room. When she returned to camera view, her face had transformed. Confusion replaced by dawning comprehension as she noticed the dining table arrangement. She approached slowly, as if the papers might bite. Miguel watched dispassionately as Laura's performance unfolded. First came disbelief as she scanned the bank statements, then indignation as she flipped through credit card bills. Her hands trembled upon opening the envelope with relationship evidence. The color drained from her face. She sank into a chair, documents scattered before her. She reached for her phone, presumably to call Miguel. His new number, obtained that morning, wouldn't receive her calls. After several attempts, she tried another number. From her gestures and the snippets of conversation audible through the camera, Miguel guessed she was calling Ricardo. The conversation appeared one-sided and brief. Laura's expression crumpled as she set down the phone. Whatever support she'd expected wasn't forthcoming. She sat alone at the table for nearly 30 minutes, alternating between reading documents and attempting calls. Finally, she picked up the divorce papers, flipping through them with increasing agitation. Miguel turned off the feed. He'd seen enough. His phone buzzed with a text from David. "She's trying to reach you, calling my office repeatedly." "Stick to the plan," Miguel replied. "All communication through you." Over the next 3 days, Laura's attempts at contact grew increasingly desperate. Calls to Miguel's workplace, messages through mutual friends, a barrage of texts to his old number, which he'd kept active but muted to document her responses. And the texts evolved from confusion, "Where are you? We need to talk," to anger, "You're being ridiculous, at least let me explain," to manipulation, "I'm worried about you, please just let me know you're okay," to threats, "If you don't respond, I'll report you missing." David forwarded screenshots of increasingly frantic emails, claims of misunderstandings, accusations that Miguel was overreacting, insistences that her relationship with Ricardo was complicated, but not what you think. Miguel maintained his silence, focusing instead on his work and setting up his new apartment. The strategic distance preserved his dignity while allowing natural consequences to unfold. On Thursday evening, Miguel's phone rang with a call from Carlos. "You need to know something," his friend said without preamble. "Laura showed up at the construction site today looking for you." Miguel frowned. "What happened?" She caused a scene. Kept saying you were overreacting, that you'd misconstrued things. Your boss asked her to leave when she started getting loud. Did she say anything specific? Just the usual manipulation, that you'd abandoned her without giving her a chance to explain, that you were being controlling by cutting her off. Carlos paused. Nobody bought it, man. The guys who know you were just uncomfortable. Your reputation speaks for itself. Miguel sighed, rubbing his temple. I was hoping to avoid workplace drama. There's more, Carlos continued reluctantly. She's telling people you financially abused her, that you controlled all the money and monitored her spending. She's spinning it hard on social media. Forward me the links, Miguel said. He'd anticipated this, the narrative flip, the attempt to make herself the victim. It was exactly why he'd documented everything so meticulously. After hanging up, Miguel reviewed Laura's recent social media posts. As Carlos had warned, she'd crafted an elaborate counter-narrative. Vague references to finally escaping control, implications of Miguel's supposed jealousy and possessiveness, carefully worded statements that painted her as a victim while avoiding actionable defamation. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was public response necessary? Would defending himself just prolong the drama? His phone buzzed with a text from David. She's contacted friends claiming financial abuse. We need to address this strategically. Miguel made his decision. Grabbing his laptop, he compiled selected evidence, focusing solely on financial records, not the intimate details of her affairs, and sent it to David with a simple message. Share discreetly with key mutual friends. The facts can speak for themselves. This wasn't about revenge or public humiliation. It was about protecting his reputation from calculated damage. By Friday, the tide had begun to turn. Several friends messaged Miguel privately, expressing support after seeing the evidence. Laura's social media campaign lost momentum as people began questioning her version of events. That evening, Miguel received an unexpected text from Maria, one of Laura's closest friends. I knew something wasn't right for a while. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Miguel stared at the message, surprised by the defection from Laura's inner circle. He replied simply, We all make choices we have to live with. She's not doing well, Maria continued. Ricardo abandoned her when his wife found out, and there are rumors she's being pushed out at work. Miguel felt a momentary pang, not of regret, but of recognition. Laura was experiencing the natural consequences of her actions, consequences he hadn't needed to engineer. That's unfortunate, he replied, but it's not my concern anymore. He set down his phone and returned to assembling a bookshelf for his new apartment. The structure was taking shape, piece by solid piece, built on a foundation of truth rather than deception. 2 weeks after Laura's return, Miguel arrived at the construction site to find her waiting in the parking lot. She looked different. The polished professional image replaced by obvious fatigue, her designer clothes traded for jeans and a simple blouse. Miguel had known this confrontation was inevitable. He'd prepared for it, rehearsing responses that would maintain boundaries without creating unnecessary drama. We need to talk, Laura said as he approached, her voice lacking its usual confidence. We have nothing to discuss outside of legal channels, Miguel replied calmly, continuing toward the job trailer. Laura followed, her composure cracking. You can't just throw away 4 years of marriage without a conversation. You owe me that much. Several workers glanced their way. Miguel's boss, Jim, emerged from the trailer, concern evident on his weathered face. Everything okay here? Jim asked, his question directed at Miguel. It's fine, Miguel assured him. Laura was just leaving. I'm not going anywhere until you talk to me, Laura insisted, her voice rising. "You ghosted me. You turned our friends against me with your one-sided evidence. You're making me look like the villain." "Your own actions did that," Miguel responded evenly. "The evidence speaks for itself." Laura's careful facade collapsed entirely. Those messages were taken out of context. "Ricardo is just a friend who—" "Please contact David for anything related to the divorce," Miguel interrupted firmly. "I'm working." Her eyes narrowed, desperation giving way to anger. "Is that how you want to play this? Fine. I'll tell everyone you abused me. See how your reputation holds up then." The threat hung in the air, witnessed by Miguel's colleagues. Rather than responding, Miguel turned to Jim. "I need to handle this. Can you give us a minute?" Jim nodded, directing a disapproving glance at Laura before returning to the trailer. Miguel faced his estranged wife. "Is that really your plan? False accusations because the truth doesn't work in your favor?" Laura's expression faltered, the emptiness of her threat exposed by his calm response. "Ricardo abandoned you," Miguel continued quietly. "Your friends are questioning your story. Your financial situation is precarious without my income. I understand you're desperate, but threats won't change anything." "What do you want from me?" Laura asked, deflated. "Nothing," Miguel replied simply. "That's the point. I want nothing from you except a clean break. The divorce papers are fair. I'm not seeking alimony or trying to take your personal property. I just want what's mine and to move forward." Laura studied him, seemingly searching for a weakness to exploit. Finding none, her shoulders slumped. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she offered weakly. 2 years of systematic deception doesn't happen by accident," Miguel countered. "Please respect the boundaries I've set. All communication through David from now on." He turned and walked toward the job site, leaving Laura standing alone in the parking lot. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation she'd wanted. No opportunity to manipulate his emotions or reframe her betrayal. Just the quiet reinforcement of consequences already in motion. That weekend, David invited Miguel to a small gathering at his home, a casual barbecue with friends who had supported him through the separation. It was the first social event Miguel had attended since discovering Laura's infidelity. "People have been asking about you," David explained when extending the invitation. "Nothing formal, just burgers and conversation. Might be good for you to get out." Miguel arrived to find a comfortable mix of familiar faces, colleagues from previous construction projects, friends from his and David's shared social circle, even Jim and his wife from the current job site. As he accepted a beer from David, Miguel noticed several people from Laura's workplace among the guests, including Sophia, Ricardo's wife. "I hope it's okay that Sophia's here," David said, following Miguel's gaze. "She reached out after everything." Miguel tensed slightly. "It's fine, just unexpected." Throughout the evening, Miguel found himself drawn into conversations that carefully avoided direct mentions of Laura while offering subtle support. Jim discussed potential projects that would utilize Miguel's expertise. A former client inquired about availability for renovation work. Friends shared stories of their own relationship challenges overcome. It was during a quiet moment by the grill that Sophia approached, 2 fresh beers in hand. And she offered one to Miguel. "I owe you an apology," she said, without preamble. Miguel accepted the beer with a questioning look. "I should have said something sooner," Sophia continued. "I suspected Ricardo was having affairs, but I didn't know who with until recently." "You don't owe me an apology," Miguel assured her. "You didn't betray anyone." "No, but I stayed silent out of fear and pride." She took a contemplative sip of her beer. "For what it's worth, Ricardo's facing consequences too. I filed for divorce, and the company is investigating him for inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Miguel nodded, processing this new information. Laura mentioned she's having trouble at work. The company doesn't appreciate being associated with scandal, Sophia confirmed, especially when it involves the marketing director and his direct report. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, two people connected by parallel betrayals. "How are you really doing with all this?" Sophia finally asked. Miguel considered the question. "Better than I expected. Building a new foundation, day by day." "That's the only way forward, isn't it?" Sophia replied. "Day by day." As the evening progressed, Miguel found himself genuinely enjoying the conversations and company. For the first time since the separation, he felt something beyond anger or hurt, a sense of community and possibility. Near the end of the gathering, David pulled him aside. "I've got an update on the legal front. Laura's attorney contacted me this morning." Miguel braced himself. "What now?" "Actually, it's good news. They're not contesting anything. She's agreed to the terms we proposed. No claims on your separate property or business assets. You keep your tools and equipment. She keeps her car and personal items." David looked almost surprised. "It's an exceptionally clean resolution. Most cases drag on much longer." "She's giving up that easily?" Miguel asked, suspicious. "From what I gather, she's more concerned with salvaging her career and reputation than fighting over assets. Plus," David added, "our documentation was extremely thorough. There wasn't much room for argument." Miguel nodded, feeling an unexpected wave of relief. Not joy. The circumstances were too painful for that, but the quiet satisfaction of closure approaching without additional drama. "So what's next?" he asked. "We finalize the paperwork next week. After that, just waiting for the mandatory waiting period to expire." David clapped him on the shoulder. "You're almost through the worst of it." As Miguel drove home that night, he realized something had shifted. The apartment he returned to was no longer just a temporary refuge from betrayal. It was becoming home, a space defined by honesty rather than deception. He signed the final divorce papers 3 days later in David's office. The process was anticlimactic, just signatures on documents, no confrontation, no last-minute revelations. Laura had sent her signed copies through her attorney, maintaining the distance Miguel had established. It was, in every sense, a clean break. The foundation had failed, but the dismantling had been methodical and precise, preserving what could be salvaged for new beginnings. 6 months after signing the divorce papers, Miguel stood in the newly renovated office of Rodriguez Construction. The sign had been installed that morning, his name now representing not just his labor, but his vision and leadership. "Looks good," Jim said, admiring the space. His former boss was now his business partner, having recognized Miguel's potential and suggested they join forces on smaller, high-quality projects. "Still can't believe we landed the West Side contract," Miguel replied, reviewing blueprints spread across the conference table. "That's going to keep us busy through next year." "I always knew you had this in you, Miguel," Jim said. "Just needed the push to break out on your own." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted shows you what you really need." The past 6 months had transformed Miguel's life in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The end of his marriage, painful as it was, had created space for new growth. The small contracting business he and Jim had launched was already gaining a reputation for quality and reliability. His financial situation, temporarily strained by the divorce, had stabilized and was improving with each completed project. His phone rang, a potential client calling about a home renovation. As Miguel wrapped up the call with a scheduled consultation, Jim gestured to the clock. "Don't you have that thing at the hardware store?" Miguel checked the time. "Right. Materials for the house. I should get going." The house was Miguel's newest project, a small fixer-upper he'd purchased at auction 3 months earlier. Located in a modest neighborhood with good schools, it represented something he'd nearly given up hoping for. A place that was entirely his, to rebuild according to his own vision. At the hardware store, Miguel carefully selected oak planks for the living room flooring. The renovation was progressing room by room, weekend by weekend. A methodical process that felt right. No rushing, no cutting corners. "Miguel?" He turned to find Maria, Laura's former friend, standing uncertainly in the aisle. He hadn't seen her since before the separation. "Maria," he acknowledged, neither warm nor cold. She approached hesitantly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for my part in everything. I should have told you what was happening." Miguel continued examining the wood planks. "We all make choices we have to live with." "She's not doing well, Miguel," Maria said quietly. "Ricardo dumped her when his wife found out, and she lost her job last month. She's had to move back in with her parents." Miguel paused, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was a momentary flicker of satisfaction, quickly replaced by detached compassion. Laura's circumstances were the natural consequences of her choices, not punishment he had engineered. "That's unfortunate," he said simply, "but it's not my concern anymore." Maria nodded, seeming to understand his position. "You look good. Healthy. I heard about your new business." "It's going well," Miguel confirmed, selecting several planks and placing them in his cart. "How about you?" "I'm okay. Started a new job downtown." She hesitated. "It's strange how everything changed so quickly." "Not that quickly," Miguel corrected her gently. "The foundation was compromised long before the walls came down." Maria accepted this with a nod. "Well, I should go. Take care of yourself, Miguel." He watched her leave, reflecting on how different his life had become in half a year. People who had once been fixtures in his daily existence were now just occasional encounters, while new relationships and opportunities had taken central importance. Later that afternoon, Miguel was measuring boards on the front porch of his renovation project when his sister's car pulled into the driveway. His 10-year-old nephew, Diego, bounded out and raced toward him. "Uncle Miguel, Mom said I could help today." Miguel smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Perfect timing. I could use a good assistant." His sister waved from the car. "I'll pick him up at 6. Don't let him use the power tools." For the next few hours, Miguel guided Diego through simple tasks, measuring, marking, learning the names of tools. The boy absorbed everything eagerly, his admiration for his uncle evident in his attentive focus. "Mom said you had a rough year, but you're doing awesome now," Diego commented as they took a water break on the porch steps. Miguel considered how to respond appropriately to a child's perception. "Sometimes you have to tear things down to rebuild them right." "Like this wall?" Diego pointed to the exposed framing visible through the front window. "Exactly. When the foundation isn't solid, you can patch things forever. But eventually," Miguel gestured to the house, "better to start fresh and build it properly." Diego nodded, processing this wisdom with surprising maturity. "Are you happier now? Mom was worried about you for a while." The question caught Miguel off guard with its directness. He gazed across the front yard, taking time to formulate an honest answer. "Happiness is like building a house," he said finally. "It takes the right foundation, quality materials, and time. And I'm still building, but the structure is sound." This seemed to satisfy Diego, who nodded sagely, as if he completely understood the metaphor. As the afternoon light began to fade, they stood back to admire their day's work, new porch railings, precisely measured and securely installed. "We did good work today," Miguel told his nephew, feeling genuine pride in their shared accomplishment. "Can I come back next weekend?" Diego asked eagerly. "I'm counting on it," Miguel replied. "We have a lot more building to do." As his sister's car disappeared down the street, with Diego waving enthusiastically from the window, Miguel returned to the porch. He sat on the steps, surveying the partially renovated house, a project that would take months to complete, with challenges and surprises inevitably hidden behind walls and under floors. But unlike the marriage he'd tried to maintain through willful blindness, this project began with clear-eyed assessment of both problems and possibilities. The foundation was solid, the materials were quality, the blueprint was honest. Miguel took a deep breath of the cool evening air, feeling neither triumphant nor broken, but something more valuable. At peace with where he stood and where he was headed, one carefully measured step at a time. When confronted with betrayal's devastating truth, we often face a pivotal choice between destructive rage and defeated surrender. Miguel's story offers us a third path, one of dignified, strategic response that preserves both self-respect and future possibilities. The construction metaphor that guided Miguel's approach provides a powerful framework for navigating life's most painful ruptures. Like an experienced builder assessing structural damage, Miguel recognized that his marriage's foundation had been compromised beyond repair. Rather than attempting superficial patches or surrendering to emotional demolition, he methodically dismantled what couldn't be saved while preserving materials worthy of future projects. This measured response runs counter to our cultural narratives about betrayal, which typically celebrate either fiery vengeance or martyred forgiveness. Miguel chose neither. His quiet strength came not from dramatic confrontation, but from strategic action, documenting truth, establishing boundaries, reclaiming what was rightfully his, and allowing natural consequences to unfold without his intervention. The wisdom in this approach becomes increasingly valuable as we age. In our later years, when we've invested decades building relationships, careers, and financial security, the stakes of betrayal grow exponentially higher. A lifetime's work can be jeopardized by impulsive reactions to painful discoveries. Yet with age also comes the perspective to recognize that dignity matters more than vindication, and that rebuilding requires salvaging what remains valuable from the wreckage. For those facing family betrayal, whether from spouses, adult children, or siblings, Miguel's blueprint offers practical guidance. First, documentation creates an unassailable record that counters gaslighting and manipulation. Second, strategic planning replaces reactive emotion with purposeful action. Third, engaging professional allies provides both practical support and objective perspective when emotions cloud judgment. Fourth, establishing clear boundaries prevents further exploitation during vulnerable transitions. Perhaps most importantly, Miguel's story demonstrates that justice doesn't require vengeance. Laura faced consequences not because Miguel engineered her downfall, but because her actions created natural repercussions once they were exposed to light. The community recognized truth without Miguel needing to wage a campaign against her. Ricardo faced professional consequences without Miguel's intervention. The divorce proceeded cleanly because evidence made manipulation attempts futile. This distinction between revenge and consequences reflects a mature understanding of justice, one that doesn't demand we become destroyers in response to being destroyed. Miguel preserved his moral authority by refusing to sink to manipulation or character assassination, even when provoked. His restraint ultimately strengthened his position, while Laura's escalating tactics undermined her credibility. In our interconnected lives, betrayal rarely remains private. Miguel's careful management of social narratives, sharing selected evidence with key people rather than engaging in public battles, demonstrates a wisdom about community dynamics that serves us well at any age. By letting facts speak for themselves and refusing to participate in drama, he allowed natural social consequences to unfold without becoming their architect. The rebuilding phase of Miguel's journey holds equally valuable lessons. His measured pace in creating a new home, business, and social circle reflects the understanding that healing can't be rushed. The patience to address one room at a time, to mentor his nephew while still processing his own pain, to form new business partnerships while old wounds remained tender. These choices represent emotional intelligence that grows with life experience. For many in their 6th, 7th, or 8th decades, betrayal by family members represents not just emotional devastation, but existential threat. Financial exploitation by adult children, abandonment by long-term partners, or manipulation by siblings during healthcare crises can compromise both quality of life and legacy. Miguel's approach offers a template for maintaining control and dignity when vulnerabilities might otherwise be exploited. The blueprint Miguel followed: assessing damage honestly, removing what can't be salvaged, preserving valuable materials, establishing a new foundation, and rebuilding methodically, applies to betrayals of all kinds. Whether facing financial deception, emotional manipulation, or public humiliation, the principles remain constant. Truth as foundation, boundaries as framework, strategic action as construction method. As we witness Miguel teaching his nephew through both words and example, we're reminded that our responses to life's most painful moments become part of the legacy we leave. By demonstrating dignity under pressure and strategic thinking amid emotional chaos, we offer future generations a template for navigating their own inevitable disappointments. Consider, then, your own approach to betrayal and boundary violations. Have you built the necessary supports, documentation systems, financial independence, professional allies, community connections that would sustain you through unexpected storms? Have you practiced the emotional discipline to choose strategic response over reactive destruction? Most importantly, have you established the clear-eyed honesty to recognize when foundations have been compromised beyond repair? Miguel's story reminds us that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in responding to it with integrity, strategy, and the courage to build anew.